Greetings, gamers! Welcome to the third installment of my series, Dissecting Rogue Decks. And in today's episode, I'm going to be going over the competitive version of my Monarch deck. Without further ado, let us begin. And here I have it, Imperial Monarch. This is what I've called it because I have a very interesting engine with this deck. So, you're going to look at this and immediately say, Gamer Man, I thought you said you don't really play meta. Well, frankly, this is something that's very interesting, right? So, Inseti, Glory of Horus, alongside the other Horus monsters and cards, are not meta. In fact, what's very weird is that though it seems like overbearing in some decks, because some decks can just special summon a billion times, some decks throw a billion things into the graveyard, milling with like reasoning and the grass is greener and stuff like that, is really super annoying in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! It's hilarious that Lightsworn, technically not really that good of a deck archetype, is still used even to this day in a lot of decks for a lot of different reasons, because it basically keeps getting updates for one, but also because the milling effect of Lightsworn monsters are just so incredibly powerful for getting things into the graveyard. So combination of all of these effects makes stuff like Inseti and the Horus monsters much stronger, because then you can add it with the fact that they're all level 8s, so therefore you can get level 8 XCs or really high octane Link monsters. You can have Link 4 pluses on your field, and I can see why some people would think the Horus monsters are meta or overbearing. I'm about to prove that wrong though. Inseti, Glory of Horus, is the searcher for the deck, and with Inseti, you must discard a card in order to search and then draw a card, alongside discarding himself. So it's a 2-card combo. In fact, not only is the Horus archetype a 2-card combo archetype, it entirely destroys your hand advantage in order for you to have field advantage. Field advantage is good if you have negates. Horus monsters don't have negates of any kind, of any sort, or so on and so forth. So by themselves, the Horus engine and archetype is not at all realistically that powerful. In fact, what's funny is that the Horus engine itself could not stand on its own 2 feet by itself against a lot of 2-card combo engines and decks from the past, which is kind of a wild concept. Now, they still beat a lot of them, of course, a lot of them, but it's just because they themselves don't have enough presence nor negation, and they have no 1-card combos in their decks in order to get anything going, which is pretty crazy. So in this deck, I have 1 Vanity's Fiend, 1 Majesty's Fiend, 1 Kiraz the Light Monarch, 2 Ether the Heavenly Monarch, and 1 Erebus the Underworld Monarch. I am not going to be rehearsing cards like I've said before. I'm just going to be going over new cards per each individual deck. So with all of these monsters out of the way, this is my Monarchs right here. I literally only have 6 cards that are tribute summons, and technically one of them's a special summon. But of course, Majesty's Fiend is incredibly important because this is a domain lock deck. I don't have Monarch Erupt. This could be seen as a pretty big missed step, but the reason why I don't have it is because I don't realistically think I need it. There are some people who would say that's not necessarily the case, but Majesty's Fiend is enough. I can get him on the field, so on and so forth. I think that's fine. So, very first card I want to talk about is Inseti, Glory of Horus. If you control King Sarcophagus, you can special summon this card from your graveyard. This is a continuous effect. This means that if Majesty's Fiend is on the field, you can still special summon Inseti, Glory of Horus, and all the other Horus monsters except for Horus the Black Flame Deity from their graveyard from their continuous effect if you have King Sarcophagus on the field. This is This is incredible. It's crazy powerful. It basically means that as long as you play the game right, and as long as you have the right monsters on the field, in the grave, so on and so forth, you virtually have a never-ending supply of tributes and recursion, because your Horus monsters also have recursion and draw power. So what's crazy about all of this is that, in my humble opinion, I actually think that Insetti and the Horus monsters are the best possible engine that you can throw into a Monarch deck. It's the reason why I did not go for Kashtira. Kashtira is good and all, but I got the Horus cards back long before there was a secret pack for them. What this meant for me was I had to individually craft all of the URs and SRs of the Horus cards and monsters. I got 3 Walls of the Imperial Tomb, 3 King Sarcophagus, 3 Insetti, and then all of the rest of the monsters. It was incredibly expensive. I ended up having to scrap so many URs and SRs. I scrapped all of my Max C, I scrapped most of my copies of Ash and other things of that sort. And I find, honestly, I'm a happier guy. Of course, there are times where I just flat out lose because people have those things and they can just negate me to all get out, and I look at you as some kind of pathetic, I guess. I mean, and move on with my life because you don't want your opponent to play the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Even though you're playing the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Solo exists for a reason, friend. So, with that being said, Insetti Glory of Horus, you can only special summon Insetti Glory of Horus once per turn this way. You can only use each of the following effects of Insetti Glory of Horus once per turn. You can send 2 cards from your hand to the graveyard, including this card, add 1 King Sarcophagus from your deck to your hand, then you can draw 1 card. I actually don't understand that you can draw 1 card facet of this. Why would you ever not want to draw a card? I don't see how this would possibly be a negative, so that you can draw a card. Maybe if like that's your last card in your deck, but the thing is how is it going to be that the last card in your deck is going to end up being King Sarcophagus? And then you just have no other card in the deck. Very weird situation. I don't know why this is a you can do it, but whatever. I'm always going to draw, because you want to replenish this. If you are discarding a card alongside this card to both of them be in the graveyard so that you can get King Sarcophagus and draw 1 card, why wouldn't you draw that card? So of course I'm going to be doing that. And he's the Searcher, and he's a 2-card combo. You have to have another card in the hand to activate this effect. Of course, it's not like Pantheism, and it's not like Monarchs at all, in the sense that this card does not have to be something particular. If it had to be a Horus card, I actually think that the Horus archetype would be pretty much garbage entirely. The Horus archetype, the Horus engine would be complete garbage, because you never want to run a deck that is completely full of these cards. It's just impossible to use them that way. There's way too many bricks in the hand if that's the case. Now, if another card you control leaves the field by an opponent's card effect while this card is in your monster zone, except during the damage step, you can send 1 card on the field to the graveyard. It's not a target, it's just a straight send. It's very powerful. You can misplay this by activating it when you are the only player that has cards on the field. Don't do that. You do not have to activate this effect. So, Insetti is very good. I love this archetype, I love this engine. Mixed with Monarchs gives me infinite tribute fodder, infinite recursion to some degree, and it really kind of just makes this deck a lot of fun. A lot of fun. And you can even recur certain things like Ankamufrite. He's going to banish himself. Monarchs have no way to get banished monsters out of the banishment naturally, through the Monarch archetype and engine. However, through Horus, we do. Now, Dalmatef, Blessing of Horus, if you control King Sarcophagus, you can special summon this card from the graveyard. Both the other 2 main Horus monsters have this, so I'm not going to mention it again. You can only special summon this once per turn this way, blah blah blah. Gains 1200 attack and defense for each Horus monster you control. This is maximum in my deck of 6000, attack and defense that he could have. Technically, I think he could have more because I believe there is a Horus extra deck monster. Not sure, don't care about it, not ever going to care about it. But if that's true, then he would be able to get up to 7,200, which is pretty insane. I don't even think the above normal 3,600 to 4,800 is bad at all. In fact, I think that's incredibly good, especially because if you decided to tribute summon Duamatov, Blessing of Horus, which I sometimes do. Sometimes I tribute summon these Horus monsters. It's not a bad idea to get your effects off because the Horus monsters are unaffected in some ways, which is very cool, and you're going to see that momentarily. If another card you control leaves the field by an opponent's card effect, while this card is in your monster zone, except during the damage step, you can draw cards equal to the number of monsters with different names in your main monster zone. You can only use this effect of Duamatov, Blessing of Horus, once per turn. So, in technicality, if I had 5 monsters on the field, they all had different names, I could draw 5 if you decided to destroy my King Sarcophagus. Some people would say that means immediately that this archetype and this engine does not lose hand advantage in order to get the monsters out in the field because you can draw all this and there's ways to recur. Dark Ruler No More exists, Evenly Match exists, just targeting and destroying this card exists. You can block this from happening. Plus Ash Blossom works against this, so on and so forth. I really just don't see Horus being overpowered. It's frustrating to go against at times if you don't have the answer, but it is not frustrating if you have the answer. And if you're playing any kind of like relevant understanding of ranked, right? Even if you're going to play rogue decks like I do, you're going to have cards that counter these issues like Evenly Matched. Evenly Matched is just such a good card for this. Not only is Evenly Matched a good card to take care of Horus, but stuff like Dark Ruler No More just means that you don't have to worry about their effects regardless. Swords of Concealing Light means that you don't have to worry about their effects regardless. It's crazy. It's crazy. There are ways to get around this, and even cheap ways to get around this. Happy Guidance of Horus is next. So if another card you control leaves the field by an opponent's card effect while this card is in your main monster zone or your monster zone except during the damage step, you can target 2 cards that are banished and or in the graveyard, either add both to the hand or shuffle both into the deck. You can only use this effect of Happy Guidance of Horus once per turn. So usually I use this as recurrence, especially from banishment or the graveyard, to add things back to my hand. Like for instance, if my opponent said, I'm going to use Harpy Featherduster to destroy your King Sarcophagus, I'm putting that King Sarcophagus back in my hand. I'm going to hard punish that. This is one thing that I was talking about before. I really think that old school 2-card combo archetypes need more punishment against the opponent's like modern meta methods. And that's basically what happened, is that the Horus cards were designed with the 2-card combo in mind and that type of gameplay. They're designed to go second. They're not at all designed to go first. They're designed to go second. And as well, they are part of the 2-card combo era, even though they were just made within a year ago. So they have punishment towards your enemy activating certain effects and doing certain things, and I think that's phenomenal. It's basically an updated modern 2-card combo deck with those kinds of things. Like if Monarchs was made today, Monarchs would have a lot more of these effects. Like most of the Monarch monsters wouldn't just have trigger effects, they would also have effects on the field that protected them or gave them some kind of negation or allowed them to beat the opponent in some way or punish the opponent in some way. They don't have that because Monarchs are just old school. And then you have Kebu Henshoff, Protection of Horus. So if another card you control leaves the field by an opponent's card effect while this card is in your monster zone except during the damage step, you can activate this effect. This turn, your opponent's monsters cannot target Horus monsters for attacks. Also, your opponent cannot target Horus monsters on the field with card effects. You can only use this effect of Kebu Henshoff, a Protection of Horus, once per turn. So of course, all of these Horus monsters can be special summoned the same way from the graveyard if you control King Sarcophagus, blah, blah, blah. Very good, because if you continue to have King Sarcophagus on the field, even after this effect goes off, it means that your opponent can't do anything to your Horus monsters. Your opponent can't destroy them with Dark Hole or a target effect or anything of that sort, can't attack them, so on and so forth. It's pretty darn good. Horus, the Black Flame Deity. This is oftentimes a card that people sleep on and then just don't put in the deck. If you're going to play Horus as an engine, I actually think this is an amazing card. And the reason why is because it says if you control a Horus monster and King Sarcophagus, you can reveal this card in your hand, then send one card from your hand or field to the graveyard, send one card on the field to the graveyard. This is just great removal. And it also allows you to set up your graveyard. And if you have not summoned any of your Horus monsters this turn, but they're already on the field, you can obviously send one of them from the field to the graveyard to activate this effect, and then just resummon them. That's the crazy part about this. If a face-up Horus monster you control, except Horus the Black Flame Deity, or a face-up King Sarcophagus you control, leaves the field by an opponent's card effect, except during the damage step, you can special summon this card from your hand. Then you can send all other monsters on the field to the graveyard. You can only use each effect of Horus the Black Flame Deity once per turn. So this seems like it would be bad in a way, but it's very good, because it's a send effect that sends all of the other monsters on the field to the graveyard, even your own. Again, if you have not summoned those monsters this turn, you could just resummon them. But even if you have, let's say it's on your opponent's turn that your opponent does something sneaky to try to destroy your cards or so on and so forth, you could just use a different card effect to get those summoned this turn during your opponent's turn, which is pretty darn cool. I have 3 Ankh-Move Right, I have 3 Tenacity of the Monarchs, 3 Pantheism of the Monarchs, 3 Domain of the True Monarchs, because these are very important cards to have in my deck in order to make sure that the Monarchs engine runs well alongside the Infinite Tribute fodder and the engine of the Horus monsters. I have 1 Return of the Monarchs, and then I have 3 King Sarcophagus. Horus monsters you control cannot be destroyed by card effects that do not target them. So, imagine that I tribute summon one of the Horus monsters on the field using 2 tributes, and then I have Domain on the field, Domain is in effect, and I have King Sarcophagus on the field. My Horus monster must be targeted in order to be destroyed. Must be targeted in order to be affected. And if I have other Horus monsters on the field, I'm going to punish my opponent for doing that. So it's kind of like a really cool combination. This is also the reason why I do not have a March of the Monarchs in this deck. I have 3 Monarch Stormforth. You can send 1 card from your hand to the graveyard, send 1 Horus monster from your deck to the graveyard. You can only use this effect of King Sarcophagus up to 4 times per turn. You must destroy your entire hand, basically, in order to use this effect to get your cards on the field. You're making a huge sacrifice because hand advantage is so important in Yu-Gi-Oh! Now, it could pay off, but it could also blow up in your face. Once per turn, at the start of the damage step, if your Horus monster battles an opponent's monster, you can send that opponent's monster to the graveyard. More send effects. This is, again, great removal. This means that my deck does not care that you have a 10,000 attack point beater. I can get that off the field, which I personally just love. I have 3 Stormforth, so I have a different way to remove your monsters. I have 2 Called by the Grave. Being honest, if you're playing a competitive deck, or a deck you are going to play in ranked, and you want to get anywhere beyond silver, you probably need 2 Called by the Grave in your deck. I frankly do not understand why this card is limited at all, semi-limited, I should say. I think it should be unlimited. Stuff like Ash and Maxi and cards that are actual hand traps that stop your opponent from doing stuff, I think those should be limited or semi-limited or just banned, outright banned. Called by the Grave is a necessary structure in your deck to make sure that you don't get hard locked by something like Ash Blossom, which is just fantastic. This card is amazing because it works on Effect Veiler, it works on Max C, it works on Droll and Lockbird, it works on Ghost Ogre, it works on all of the monster hand traps in the game. And it also works on your opponent using Horus, especially Inseti. So if your opponent uses Inseti's effect to search out King Sarcophagus and you called by it, if your opponent has no King Sarcophagus or any other cards in the hand to play, you just pretty much win. And that's the problem with the Horus archetype and the Horus engine particularly, is that it has a lot of bricks in the hand. So if you don't get Inseti's effect off, you just oftentimes lose. So target one monster in your opponent's graveyard, banish it, and if you do, until the end of the next turn, its effects are negated, as well as the activated effects and effects on the field of monsters with the same original name. So for 2 turns, your opponent cannot use Ash Blossom or Max C or whatever you do, whatever you target, it and banish. This is just an amazing card. Then I have 3 evenly matched. So I don't have anything like Harpy's Feather Duster. I don't have anything like Heavy Storm or Raigeki or Interrupted Kaiju Slumber. I don't have any of that stuff in this deck, and the reason why is because this is purely a going first deck, right? Monarch Domain goes first. That's what it wants to do. However, evenly matched allows you to go first even when you go second. You missed your battle phase, but you do miss your battle phase even if you go first, so that doesn't matter. So if I can use evenly matched, it resolves. My opponent only gets 1 card left on his field. Then I can set up my field and it's back to square one. And if my opponent doesn't have anything in response to anything that I'm doing, I literally just win. This is crazy. It's incredibly fun. I absolutely love my Imperial Monarch deck. So at the end of the battle phase, if your opponent controls more cards than you do, you can make your opponent banish cards from his field face down so that he controls the same number of cards as you do. If you control no cards, you can activate this card from your hand. So this becomes a hand trap if you control no cards. Some people don't like this. Unfortunately, reality coming to hit you real hard here. Modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Meta, there's a reason why Dark Hole, Raigeki, none of these things are banned. Some of them are limited, some of them are semi-limited, I'll grant that. But there's a reason why evenly matched isn't even semi-limited. It's because it skips your battle phase. You cannot battle using this card. It not only skips your battle phase, but if you don't have the proper setup, you just lose anyway. Even if you banished everything your opponent has except for 1 card, typically, if he gets 1 card in his hand, he's just going to play and win. This is actually not realistically that powerful of an effect. It's just not. Some people would look at this and be like, wow, this is crazy. This is insane. You know what this hard beats? Pretty much rogue decks. And if you've ever played a rogue deck or a fun deck on ranked and you've lost to evenly match, you can very much be assured of this. Not too long ago, I played against a synchro summoning deck in which he ended up, I want to say he synchro summoned for maybe 10 minutes straight. Not kidding. And he had 5 monsters on the field. No, 6 monsters on the field, and 4 of them were Omni Negates. Even if you had 3 evenly matched in the hand and 3 Dark Holes in the hand, which you wouldn't realistically ever have, he had traps and spells that could have negated that stuff as well, because he did also negate some of my things with that. He negated my Interrupted Kaiju Slumber. He negated everything I did. He had stuff in his hand like Ash Blossom to negate everything I had. I could not play the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! That's just how the meta is. So when people complain about stun, for instance, Monarchs, this is stun. This is a stun deck. When people complain about that, I'm like, well, how is it really realistically any different from somebody using an Omni Negate board? What's crazy is it actually is different though, because people can still play Yu-Gi-Oh! Regularly with normal and tribute summons, and even some special summons to some degree if I have certain cards on the field, as long as I don't have Vanity's Fiend on the field, that is. And we can still duke it out like old school Yu-Gi-Oh! You can still play. In fact, other rogue decks, other tribute summon decks don't care at all about this deck. At all. So True Dracos would beat this deck. So what's crazy about that to me, what makes me just so absolutely incensed about the way people think about this stuff is you have to look at these cards. You have to look at what Yu-Gi-Oh is doing now. You cannot just look at Yu-Gi-Oh and think about 2005 Yu-Gi-Oh and think, "Wow, evenly matched is broken. This is insanely busted." It's not at all. Like, I honestly think that evenly matched isn't much more powerful than Quaking Mirror Force, and that'll never be limited. And some people would say, well, that's crazy. Quaking Mirror Force, all it does is put your cards face down. Yeah, but they can never be put face up. And if you have link monsters, and if you're link summoning, you cannot link summon again because those monsters occupy those slots, and you can't link summon over them. You can't do anything basically but tribute. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy how that people don't realize or recognize the reality of what modern Yu-Gi-Oh has become and what you have to do to combat it. So when you look at this deck is for fun, yes, but it's also for ranked, and it is supposed to be able to take out other ranked duelists. Up until about the Platinum Diamondish era, I would say up until Gold and Platinum, I have like a 80 to 90% win rate with this deck. After Diamond, it drops pretty steadily till it gets to the point where it's basically zero. I don't think anybody at master level would ever win anything with this deck, just being honest. Now, there are 2 Prime Monarchs in this deck because you should always have 2. There are some people who say that you shouldn't have 2, that 1 is good enough. But the thing is if both of them find themselves in the graveyard, you can actually just banish one and then special summon the other, and then you can recur with Idea in your normal Monarch decks and bring that card to your hand, and then you can recycle it that way. And because this deck doesn't use Idea, the Heavenly Squire, or any of that type of the Monarch's engine, I would need stuff like Happy Guidance of Horus to bring this back to my hand, but that's perfectly fine. And then my final card for this deck is Canopic Protector. Once per chain, when your opponent activates a card or effect, you can special summon 1 Horus monster from your hand or grave, but for the rest of this turn, you cannot special summon monsters with the same original name by the effect of Canopic Protector. If this card is sent from the hand or field to the graveyard, you can set this card but banish it when it leaves the field. You can only use this effect of Canopic Protector once per turn. This is also another card in the Horus archetype that people sleep on a lot. And it's because people just look at this and go, well, what's the point of this? I'm just going to be summoning my monsters to XZ summon them off anyway. So maybe if you're going to XZ summon them and never detach them as material, then this would have no point, sure. But let's say you XZ summon and you detach them as material, or you link summon, and they're all in the grave. You already summoned them this turn, you can't summon them again. But every time your opponent activates a card or effect, this is not once per turn, this is as many times as your opponent activates a card or effect, you can summon a Horus monster from your hand or the grave. This means you could even end up summoning Black Flame Horus off of this effect if you really wanted. It's pretty darn good, and it's also something that allows you to discard a card with either King Sarcophagus or Inseti, and it comes right back to the field if you do so. Now that is the whole showcase of this deck. It is time to get into the demonstration. Alright, so Imperial Monarch is a deck built to primarily go first. However, it has tools to go second. I'm going to pick random because when you're playing online, you sort of have to roll with the punches. It's the cool thing about Yu-Gi-Oh being basically a one-of format on Master Duel. I don't really like the 3-of format. Some people would say that's kind of crazy. Why wouldn't you like the 1-of or the 3-of format? Because then it allows you to have like that best of 3. The reason why I don't is because then people just slot in a whole bunch of nonsense in the side deck, and then things just go into like a counter situation. A perfect example of this is playing Kaijus. It is virtually impossible to play Kaijus in a going first scenario. So if you play against an opponent, you go first, or you get to choose first with Kaijus. You go second, and your opponent's like, oh, wait a minute now. Why would you go second with Kaiju or with your deck in this day? And then he sees you're playing Kaijus, and then you go your second duel. He chooses for you to go first, and you just auto lose. even if you have good side deck options, 15 cards is typically not going to make your entire kaiju deck playable going first. It's just not. And even if it does to some extent or some degree, it's still going to be difficult. You're not going to have a deck built to go first. So first, I have Ankh-Mufrite. I'm going to go ahead and use his Pendulum effect, because why the heck would I not? And then, time to summon him. I can activate Imseti, Glory of Horus. Goodbye. So obviously, the less important effects you always want to use first. I always want to use Ankh-Mufrite before I would use Imseti first, if I had both in my hand in this scenario. Because if my opponent was like, I'm going to ash your draw with Ankh-Mufrite, who cares? I don't care about that. Always use your bait tactics first. Always. So I can start discarding cards. I don't actually want to discard a lot here. So I think maybe, for the sake of it, I don't really care about Stormforth. And then I'm going to bring out these two. This is all I'm going to be able to get this turn, unfortunately. Because I don't want... well, I mean... Yeah, I just do not want to immediately delete my hand. So, I'm going to summon Erebus over these two monsters. And then I'm going to send 2 Monarch spells and traps to the grave. And then I am going to reveal all 3 of my domain by banishing Pantheism. And after doing that, of course, I'm going to activate it. Now, because I have a Tribute Summon monster as well as Domain of the True Monarchs, I am pretty much set. I have protection, I have good monsters, I have removal. I took a card from my opponent's hand, so he's hand ripped by 1, which is pretty funny. And I'm pretty well golden. Now, on the following turn, I could decide to disrupt my opponent by summoning Ether. So this is absolutely something that I could do. It just depends on what my opponent puts on the field. And if I have to do it, I'm definitely going to do it. Alright, so he's going to tribute that for 1 of him. And then I'm going to go ahead and banish Tenacity to summon Ether. I'm going to summon her over Erebus, so I keep these 2 monsters. And then I'm going to send 2 of my Monarch spells and traps to the grave. I am going to summon Kiraz. Now, the reason why I'm summoning Kiraz... missed the timing. Yes, because... So, this is a perfect example. I missed the timing because this buffoon, Ravael, Lord of Phantasms, when he is summoned, or when I summon while he's on the field, what happens is my opponent gets a special summon of a token. And that interrupted my Kiraz, which is fine. It's actually perfectly fine, because what it's going to do is allow me to show off the effect that it can be missed. Unfortunately, my opponent decided he was going to attack Imseti, Glory of Horus, with that. So he has protections from target and destruction, but he does not have protection against effects that send. And... I'm going to send Kiraz because I don't need him anymore. I can put that on the field. And that's pretty much it. I have won the duel. So had my opponent attacked any other monster It would have been better for my opponent, but grand scheme of things, I would have pretty much guaranteed one regardless, because even though my opponent had a 4,000 attack point beater on the field, who had protection, by the way, so it's not like it was a totally lopsided duel. He had protection, 4,000 beater, he had the field spell, he had the effects on the field. I was able to show that regardless, my deck can kind of deal with even the more powerful of the enemies. If I do go first and I have everything set up, I just hard counter pretty much the entire meta. If the meta has no, if that card player, if that player has no way to get rid of my domain or my tribute summon monster, I just win the duel. And that's pretty darn cool in my opinion. That is all, though. Thank you for joining me. If you like my content, please upvote and follow, or like and subscribe. Leave a comment down below. And while you're at it, have a great and glorious day gaming.